today is about agentic engineering. And since I already saw the question in the chat, that's what we're going to build. Since I saw the question, agentic engineering is a term which I believe was coined by the SET developer. So IDE, I mean. So in case you don't know, SET is an IDE built with Rust, which you can use. It's pretty good, but we'll not use it today, actually. And they came up with that phrase, agentic engineering, basically as an alternative to vibe coding. The idea is that you still use AI for generating a lot of code. As you will see today, we'll let AI generate as much code as possible, but you do so in a more controlled way. That's the idea. So instead of going with the vibes and ending up with a lot of code that doesn't really work, or where you end up in a place where you can't continue because AI kind of gets into that cycle we all know where it's not able to continue. Instead of going down that path, which I also did in a past live stream, which was not that great, instead of doing that, we'll do agentic engineering, which is what I'm actually doing a lot these days. That's essentially how I work. What I'll show you today is essentially how I've been working over the last couple of weeks, and it works pretty well. I hope it will also work pretty well today. You never know with AI, but we will see. So what will we build? We will build a web app where users will be able to upload a video, maybe in the future also multiple videos, but we'll start with one. And that video will then be transcribed by AI. So AI will generate captions. And I'll be using the 11 Labs API for that, which is a paid API, a paid model, but it is a pretty good captioning model. You could use a free open model like Whisper, but here I'll use that API. So that will do the actual captioning. But before we use that API, we'll convert the uploaded video file, and we'll go with MP4 files for this stream here. We'll convert that to an MP3 to reduce the size a little bit. We'll then store that on Cloudflare. It's not here, but on this slide, but we will store that on Cloudflare. So we'll upload it to Cloudflare R2, which is essentially S3, but cheaper. We'll store the MP3 there, then we'll transcribe it as explained with that API. And then we'll get back SRT captions, which is a certain caption format. We'll convert that to VTT captions, which is a slightly different captioning format. And then that might be the most interesting part, though I think everything will be pretty good. But then we'll actually take it a step further and we'll create animated burned-in captions, which you might know from short form content, right? We all know these videos where we have like the big chunky captions at the bottom where the currently spoken word is highlighted. That's what we'll also build. And we'll build an app that does all of that for us and that then gives us the finished video, which we can download, so that in the end, we have an uploaded video and thereafter we have the adjusted video with the burned-in captions, and in addition, we have the SRT and VTT caption files, which you could, for example, use on YouTube to make sure that your videos have perfect captions. That should be a pretty helpful app, and to be very honest, I've built a process like this on my system, but I haven't built a web app like this, so we'll do that together, and we'll do it with a lot of AI. So let's get started. Oh, by the way, we'll also add authentication using BetterAuth. And yeah, I'll probably use Drizzle ORM for interacting with a SQLite database. And I want to use React Router in framework mode here. Of course, we could also use Next.js. You can use anything. I'll just use that. And since we got a lot to do, I'll just get started. Now, I have an empty project here. There's nothing in it. And in that project, I will start with bunx and run this command. And yeah, I'll be using bun here. So that should create a new project, and a new React Router project, and actually I'll create it in this folder here. So that will give us a bunch of files. And yeah, I want to make this a Git repository. I want to install the dependencies. And soon I'll move that chat over to the left so that you can see it a bit better. because we'll be using that AI chat a lot. And currently it's hidden by the Twitch chat and the YouTube chat, which is of course not ideal. So now we get this basic React router framework mode application here. And with that out of the way, let me move that over. And for that, we'll move it to the left. And now I have the file explorer here on the right, but that's okay. We don't really need that a lot. Because we'll mostly work with that chat. I will, however, start by creating a basic structure on my own. Hi, Derek. Hi, everyone again. I will start by creating a basic structure on my own because in my experience, it often helps the AI if you create a structure, and you definitely want to guide it. You don't want to let it do everything on its own. So what do we need? We need an authentication screen. So I'll add an auth TSX file here in the routes folder, which will handle, you guessed it, user authentication. And we'll then need our, let's say, video TSX file, which will allow a user to upload a video, select what they want to do with it, and then handle everything else, essentially. So that's the plan. By the way, as always, I will make the finished code by the end of this stream, which hopefully is the finished project. I will make that available, and the overall recording of today will also be available on my Maximilian extended YouTube channel, and there in the video description you'll then find a GitHub link to that code. So that's that. So I got these two routes, and that is essentially all the routes I need. So here in the routes TS file, I'll use the good old tab completion to define a route and add the import. And actually, that completion is incorrect. But the problem is that this framework mode is a bit is less known to cursor and so on. So it doesn't know about that, which is why some completions are off. But still, it should work pretty good overall. So we registered both routes now. I got them here, and now let's just quickly add some dummy content so that we can see that it works. So here I'll return just a h1 tag where I say auth route. Don't need the outlet, thank you very much. And then here in video TSX, I'll have my video route, and I'll name that video route. And now I can start my development server, bun dev, and get an error. Oh yeah, because I renamed that file. This is video, and of course then I need the auth route here. Or actually, auth should be the default, let's say, and then here we use video like this. So now with that, if we restart, that should work. Yep, it does. And if I go to this, we can see that we're on the auth route by default. And if I switch to /video, we're on the video route. So that's the two routes we need. Why ignore Discord? At least let us know on Discord when you're going on stream. So the thing is, I'm actually not ignoring it because I'm a bad person, but because I got the feedback that when I send an announcement at everyone, that seems to annoy some people, and I don't want to spam people, which is why I don't do that all the time. That's why. I'm trying to figure out a way of annoying the least amount of people, as it seems I'm always annoying someone. So yeah, that is unfortunate, but I'm trying my best. So now we have these two routes, and with that, we can continue. And I will continue by adding BetterAuth, which is an amazing library for adding authentication. So I will add this dependency on my own because that is something I typically like to do on my own. We'll use AI for a lot, but for setting up the project and so on, that is simply faster if I do it because I know what I want to do. So I added the BetterAuth dependency, and I will also already add Drizzle because I also want to use that for interacting with my database. So for that, I want to use SQLite. So I will need to install these two dependencies. I don't need .env because bun will handle that for me. And I will install this here, just drizzle kit actually as a development dependency. Whoops, clear bun add -d drizzle kit. So that's that. That should be all the dependencies we need right now. So we can now run this again. Now also get rid of this. And now we can start setting up everything. And for that, I want to start, of course, with better auth. And for this, of course, we can go through the getting started documentation here, through the installation documentation specifically. We did already install the dependency. We now need a .env file. So actually, let's quickly do that. Let's add a .env file here and also make sure that this is ignored in git ignore. And in .env, we want to have the better auth secret and the better auth URL. So the secret is some secret string, which should be a bit better in production than just the word secret. And then here, that is the URL of our app. And in my case here, I think it's 5173 for React Router. So that is something we need. And now, of course, we can go through the rest of this documentation, and that would not be too bad. It's pretty well documented, but we can also try using AI for that. And of course, I'm hoping it will work. It has worked for me in the past. I'll try again. So I'll say, in this project, I need to add authentication using the better auth library. Therefore, please set up better auth as explained in their official installation docs. And then I'll paste in the link because cursor, which I'm using here, that is probably an important information. I'm using cursor here. It can visit links like this and it can extract the content and add it as a context here. By the way, I'm using Claude for Sonnet as a model. I already installed the dependencies and set up the environment variables. I need you to create the required auth related files and add the code logic as instructed in those docs. And now let's see what that gives us. In theory, and it has worked for me in the past, we'll see if it works today. In theory, that should go to that website, check it, and then hopefully perform the different steps we find in there. If that is not the case, then we'll of course do it manually, but we'll see if that works. So currently it seems like it's exploring the file system of my project, which makes sense. And now it is starting to do stuff. So it added an auth and an auth client TS file in a lib folder, which is a good start because that is something we can see in the better auth documentation as well. And we'll see if the stuff it does in there makes sense. So that seems to be in line on first sight with what the better auth docs will probably show us. It even already adjusted the code for using Drizzle, though we might need to do some tweaks here and there. And that is, by the way, the entire idea behind agentic engineering. The idea is that you combine your knowledge as a developer and your ability to dive into the code and improve the code with AI, which is, of course, pretty fast at generating code and iterating on code. So you try to get the best of both worlds. So by the way, I'm not using rules here in this project yet, but I do sometimes add some rules if there are things that annoy me or things it constantly gets wrong. But I don't need a lot of rules in general. Yeah. So we'll see. I see that it does set the dialect to terso, and I don't plan on using that. So that is some creativity by the model here, which I don't want, but we can, of course, change that manually. Now it wants to run drizzlekit generate, and I don't want it to do that yet, so I'll stop it here. So yeah, it did that for me. And now we can see what it actually did for us here. So as mentioned, it added these two files, auth client TS and auth TS. It also added this routes, well, the routes folder existed. It added this API folder, and in there, this auth catch all route, which is promising because we need that as well. But now we'll compare that. Do you write some code manually? Some code, yeah. So now we can quickly go through the docs and see whether that setup is correct. So the docs tell us to have an auth TS file, and in there set up better auth. And then depending on the database we're using with Drizzle, for example, we use the Drizzle adapter and then the provider, which we're using like SQLite. And if we take a look at the auth TS file, that is pretty much what we have here. Better auth is being set up. The Drizzle adapter is used. Provider is SQLite. Email and password authentication is enabled. Social providers, I'll delete that here. For this demo here, for this project, I want to stick to email and password. I will change something here already. That's the part with manually adjusting the code. In that Drizzle adapter, I'll set use plural to true, which means I want to have table names that have a plural form. So users instead of user. It's just my personal preference. So that's that. It's also importing from a DB file here in the DB folder, which it created. And in there, interesting, in there, it already created the auth related schema. So that is something I'll actually change soon. I don't want that right now. I'll delete it for now. And in index.ts, it's importing from that schema file, which is now empty. And it's creating a client using libsql with a URL and an auth token. If we take a look at the Drizzle documentation for SQLite, we can see that we actually, yeah, we would use a URL, but I don't think we need the auth token here. So I think creating that database client with just the database URL, or actually the DB file name, makes more sense. By the way, we didn't give it Drizzle's documentation as context, so that's why I probably didn't know that. So that's that. That should be all for this Drizzle setup for SQLite, because the next steps here, or this is actually the schema, which I'll create in a second. And then we need this Drizzle config file. It did create one actually, which links to the schema, has an out folder. Dialect, that should be SQLite. Don't want to use Terso. Don't need the auth token. And the database credentials, well, that should still be the DB file name. So DB file name like this. But with that, that should be good. We'll work on the schema soon. Back to auth, that seems good. If I go back to the better auth documentation, we can now run this command here to generate the better auth schema. So I'll grab this, or actually I'll now accept all the code. We can still change it later. And I'll run bunx better auth CLI generate, which should give us the database schema, so the definitions of the database tables needed by better auth in the Drizzle schema format. Now here I'm getting an error. Yeah, because I have an error in my file, in my code simply. So for one schema here, I'll just export an empty object for now to get rid of this error, and I need to set that environment variable. So the DB file name, that should be app.db, let's say. So that was this error. Let's see if that works now. Still get an error, URL invalid. The URL appdb is not a valid format. Yeah, probably, because it should probably have file in front of it, right? It's been a time since I last set up the Drizzle SQLite connection, but I do assume, yeah, it needs to be defined like this. with file colon in front of it. So let's do that. And let's give it another try. Whoops. Regarding the React course, sorry, not really what this stream today is about. So it's best if you ask in the Q&A section of that course to get help and additional support. Hi everyone who joined now, and thanks for the promotion, fixing tiny tedious things, and for the awesome feedback. Means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Here I will now confirm that it generates this schema and then move this into the DB folder. And this auth schema TS file, that now contains the schema, the definitions of the auth-related tables as Drizzle needs it. And its users and so on, because I set this, this use plural setting here to true. So that will be needed by Drizzle to then actually initialize the database and set up the tables and so on, because that is what Drizzle is there for. It's also there for querying the database, but also for initializing it. To do that, I need to go to this index TS file, not this one, but the schema TS file, I mean. And in there, I want to export everything from auth schema. So just forward it, essentially, because right now that is the only schema I have. If I add more schemas for other business logic, for storing information about the uploaded videos, for example, I could do that here as well. But I also want to export everything from the auth schema. And I do that here because then in the index.ts file here, I'm making Drizzle aware of that schema. That's how everything is then connected. There also is one other step you need to do, or I always found necessary. I also need to go to the Drizzle adapter here in the Better Auth setup and also point it at my schema here. So yeah, I need to import the schema here as well. I think that should be required. And with that out of the way, I can now write or generate the actual SQL instructions and then write them to the actual database. And that will be done by Drizzle. And it will be done by Drizzle by running, I think it's Drizzle kit generates the migrations. Yep, it does. We can find them in the Drizzle folder here. That are the actual SQL commands that will be executed. And to execute them, we need to run migrate, Drizzle kit migrate. And actually, I'll quickly update my package.json file and add these, or Cursor adds them for me, add these commands here so that I can just run db generate and db migrate to run, well, these commands when we later change the schema. Love your content. What are you building today? We'll build a video captioning app, and we'll do a lot of that with AI. Currently, I'm still writing a lot of code myself because I'm doing the initial setup work where I found AI to struggle a bit, but soon we'll switch to more AI code. So now we got Better Auth configured, we got Drizzle configured, we got a database file. Here it is, appdb, that's the database file. SQLite is stored locally, of course. And with that, we now are ready to move on to building some UI and see if that all works. So for that, I'll go to my auth route here. And looks like Cursor already gave me some code here. But this is not the code I want, not at all. This is code where it tries to handle the form submission manually on the client side, and that is not at all what I want. Instead, since I'm using React Router, the latest version, I want to use an action function. So I want to have an async function called action here, where I got my route action args, and route can be imported. That is something that is generated automatically by React Router. We'll get the request in there to extract the data. And I also want to redo the UI here. I also want to use Tailwind, and I'm not sure if this ships with Tailwind. It does. Tailwind is already installed. Perfect. So now back to some agentic engineering. I'll start a new chat, and that is something I typically try to do. If I'm working on a new step, a new feature, I like to do that in a new chat, because my experience is that if you put too much into one chat, your the context is too much and there are too many unrelated things in there, leading to worse results. In addition, you're paying for all these tokens, or I'm paying for them. Cursor gives you a limited amount of use per month, and you can enable usage-based billing, which I did, but then you're paying for all those tokens, and therefore I want to limit the amount of tokens and only put the important context into every request, so to say. Context engineering is the new buzzword for that. So that's what we'll do here. So what I'll do is I'll actually nuke this entire code that it generated before because I don't want that. And I'll ask it to regenerate. I'll leave the action function in this state because that makes sense. So we're using BetterAuth for authentication in this app. Therefore, in this route component, build a UI that asks the user to enter an email and a password. Since we're using React Router v7, which has Remix merged into it, the idea is to use React Router's form component, note the uppercase F, to handle the form submission via the, and then I'll use the @ symbol and point it at this action function here in this file to make it sure or make it clear that this is the action function I'm referring to. I'm not doing this all the time. This is also just trying it in different ways, but I try to be very specific with the context I provide. So I wanted to use this action function for handling the form submission. I wanted to use the form component. I make it really clear that the uppercase F is not a typo, but important. And yeah, we're using Tailwind v4. So please use that for creating a visually or a modern, clean authentication UI. The user will also be able to switch between sign up and login mode. So please add an appropriate button, flat design, no background color below the submit button. Also adjust the button captions depending on the mode the user is in. Now, typically what you want to try to do, or what I try to do, is you want to limit the amount of work you put into a single prompt. Here, I'm combining a couple of steps: UI creation, handling the submission, and handling different modes. But I try to keep it relatively focused so that the large language model is not getting overwhelmed. And with that, I'll send it to it and we'll see what it does. So it's warning me about my usage limits, but I actually did already enable usage-based pricing, so that should be fine. And now we'll see what we get when it generates. So a bunch of code. Let's make sure our development server is up and running to preview that. And let's go to, yeah, this is the correct page. Get some import error. We'll see if that goes away or if we need to fix that. So cannot find imported from, okay, so in this file here, it's struggling to import this file. I wonder why that is. Is the lib folder, where is the lib folder? It's in app, right? Oh, lib is not in app, lib should be in app. So let's change this, move that folder, now it's here. And now that is better, that should do the trick. Okay, pretty big. So that is the UI. Now we could have definitely tweaked it. By the way, we could also bring in shed CN. And yeah, why don't we do that? why don't we do that now that I think of it? Let's install ShadCN. Let's run this command here, or just copy this bun command. And let's install ShadCN, use the gray color scheme. And then I want to add, actually now we can add the entire authentication pre-built UI ShadCN offers. Why not? So let's use this one here. So I'll just copy this, execute that to bring that in. And now I could manually wire up things, but I'll just let the AI do that. So I'll go back here to my auth route to load that as context, because the route you're currently on, or the file you're currently in, I should say, is automatically added as context to the prompt. So I'll say, actually, in this file, we got an Auth UI. Please replace it with the ShadCN pre-built Auth UI you find in, and then let's point it at the login form here. Still make sure that the user can switch between sign up and log in and adjust button labels appropriately. And we'll see what that gives us. And it should be, and I hope it's now not working just because I'm saying this, but it should in theory be great for tasks like this, because swapping code like this is something that can be a bit annoying, and letting AI do it should therefore hopefully be a lot better and less work for you. It is almost like having a retarded junior engineer. It can be for sure, but when used right, I found it to be really useful for certain tasks. So the idea is to try to get the best of both worlds, which is not always easy, I'll admit. So let's see what we get here. That definitely looks better. Got that login screen here using ShadCN. And if I click here, we switch to a different mode. So if I click on sign up, we go to the create your account mode. If I click sign in, we go to the login mode. That is looking good. By the way, this here, of course, is wrong. I have not added social auth. I'll leave it here for now, but it won't work. I will not make it work. Instead, I'll, well, just use email and password authentication. So here it's now importing a bunch of stuff from ShadCN, and it's then using that form provided by React Router, which is good. And it is setting up these different inputs. And I see it actually, it rebuilt the login form itself. It's not using the one provided by ShadCN, probably because of the mode switching. Instead, it just imports some of the primitives, button input label, and builds its own form. And it's good enough for me here because I don't want to spend the entire day on authentication, so I will just accept this. And now we can work on handling the submission. For that here, in this action, we want to make sure that we, well, guess what? Authenticate the user, or we want to validate the input, of course, first of all. So we want to add validation, and again, that is something we can let AI do. Please add. You don't need to write please, by the way. Please add user input validation to this action function. Email must include an @ password should be at least 7 characters long. Both must not be empty. Also, or return an error message if validation fails, and output it in the UI. And for that, I can already prepare it, because we'll get some component props here by React Router. React Router, by the way, is the front end I'm using, or I'm using it for the full stack app. And yes, this is Cursor. And in there, we'll get the action data using the action data prop, which will contain anything returned by the action function. And now we can do that. So now we can let it generate this entire validation logic here. And yeah, you can write this yourself. And the question is, what's quicker? Here, I'll just let it do it. And it should also update the JSX code, of course, to output the errors if there are any. Looks like it's adding that code as well. And with that, if I press login, well, actually, I got the default validation by the browser. But here for the password, if it's too short, I'm getting this error. So that is working. Good. So with that, I think that should be fine. Now I want to make sure that we do actually create a user or log in. And yeah, I'm not sure what that super sticker. Well, anyways, so for that, I can again use better auth and use the API. So I'm using that better auth object, which we set up in the auth TS file here, and call sign up email. I keep on forgetting how to use that. Body. Yeah, here. Email, password, and we also need the name, and the name will just be the email here. And that will give me a response, and that response does not have an error, so we don't need to check for that. That response will have a token or a user object. And I think it's been some time since I last did this. I do remember that when I handle it myself here on the server, I also need to manually set the cookie. Is this called vibe coding, where you do not understand what you're doing? That would be vibe coding, yeah. I'm understanding what I'm doing though. So that would then not be vibe coding. I just need to remember, because better auth will actually set a or create a cookie for you if you trigger the auth flow from the client side. Here I'm doing it from the server side though, so I need to manually set that cookie. And I try to remember what that cookie name was it's looking for. Whoops. So actually, I will quickly try to find another project where I did that in the past, if I can quickly find one. Otherwise, we'll have to try to figure it out. What was that? That is here. That's the one a bit annoying part about better auth, I will say, that if you do not authenticate from the client side, you have to manually handle all that and manually set that cookie, and that can be a bit annoying because I keep on forgetting the name of that, unfortunately. But we'll get there. I think I did. Did I not do that here? Well, since I don't want to waste this time here, I think we can try something else. We can actually use a client action here to run this on the client side for now. And then we can use the auth client and use sign up email to let Better Auth do that on the client side. So I'll get back a response here. And let's see whether that works. So now if I go to sign up mode here, hello. Did this just break? The beauty of using AI. Why is that not working anymore? Well, we can ask AI, right? I got a problem on this page. Clicking the button to change the mode between login, sign up is not working. And I can't find the issue. Maybe AI can find it. So that is really weird. Let's see what AI comes up with. It's especially weird since it used to work, right? There's a syntax error, really. Like a semicolon? I mean, yeah. Well, that's an interesting answer, right? Pointing me at a semicolon, which is incorrect, which is clearly not the reason. If I switch back to an action, oh, actually, let's remove that auth here. If I switch back to action instead of client action, now it works. That's interesting. But client action should be a thing in React Router. Okay. Okay, whatever. So it is working again. Good. So let's check if that now works. If I do enter some valid credentials here, and I press sign up, let's see. That looks good. Here in my application area, I got a new cookie, a Better Auth cookie. The name, by the way, would have been Better Auth session token if I would have set it manually. And with that, we now got authentication. Thank God. And that, by the way, that's just an error that is constantly, or a warning that's constantly appearing related to Chrome DevTools. So everything is working. Good. Now, I could definitely switch back to a server-side action and then manually set that cookie, but we've already spent so much time on authentication, and that's not the main part of the app. So let's continue. And let's continue by making sure that when the user is authenticated, we forward them. So for that, I'll check if response error. If we have an error, in which case I want to return that error message and output it. Otherwise, I want to return a redirect using React Router's redirect function and redirect to the video page. I think it's called video, not videos, right? Let's check. It's video. Yeah. So I want to redirect to the video page if authentication worked. By the way, I'm currently only signing users up. I should, of course, check if the mode is logged in. In that case, I want to sign in, not sign up. Else, I'll do that like this. And then I want to check if we got an error in both cases. And yeah, it's the same code, kind of. We could try to refactor it. Here, I'm fine with it like this. So now, if I reload and I sign in with that user I just created, If I use an incorrect password, it should not work. And it would be nice if we would get an error message, but I'll first try if it works with the correct password. Yeah, I'm redirected to the video route, so that is working. Perfect. So instead of spending more time on the login screen, which we could still optimize and show more error messages, but instead of doing that, let's start working on that video part. And therefore, on that video route here, I want to have a UI where, for one, there should be like a top bar where we can press a logout button, I guess. But then most importantly, there should be an area where we can upload an image, where we can, a video, I mean, where we can also drag and drop a video. So new chat, and I'll say in this route, or on this route, add the following two things. A top bar with a welcome title and a logout button, which does also log the user out and redirect back to the starting route, home route, auth route, and a file upload area, which supports drag and drop that allows the user to upload exactly one MP4 file. And that's all I want for now. By the way, I haven't added route protection, so theoretically right now we can also go to the video route without being authenticated. We can add that later. What framework are you using? I'm using React Router here. React Router version 7 in the framework mode, which allows you to build full stack app with it. Like Remix in the past, the Remix framework. Do you sometimes get tired of programming? Well, there have been times like this where I maybe don't feel it 100%, but I simply try to mix things up and not spend my entire days programming so that I have a nice combination of work. I have different things I do essentially. So it's now flashing out that UI. By the way, one thing it constantly does is it always creates functions for me as anonymous arrow, or not anonymous, but as arrow functions, which is fine, which works, but I actually like them with the function keyword, and I have added a rule for that in the past, and it just ignored that. So not a huge deal, but something I then typically fix myself by fixing it in one place and then just using tap, tap, tap to have it fix it for me. So let's see if I save that. That's the UI we have. If I click logout, I am redirected back. If I then log back in, I'm back here. And now let's see what happens if I drag an MP4 file in there. For that, I'll quickly grab one on my second screen, and I'll simply grab a video file from my latest course, which, by the way, shameless plug, you can get, 1 second. You can get on Udemy, for example, by simply entering acadlink/AI agents into your browser. That will automatically give you a nice discount to my latest course where we build AI agents, as the name suggests. It has a great rating. It is a great course, hopefully. So I'll upload a video from that course here. Just picking any video. I'll pick a short one here. Drag and drop it in there. That's looking good. I'm getting some feedback. And yeah, looks like it was registered. If I click here, I can also manually pick one. I can also remove it. Well, removing it opens the picker again. Clicking anywhere opens the picker. So that's an issue we need to fix. But it generally worked. Looks good, but there is an issue. When I click onto remove, it opens the picker instead of removing the uploaded video. By the way, currently it's not really uploaded. It's just added here in the browser, so to say. We haven't added the actual upload functionality yet, but it will do so soon. A few videos ago, you were shitting on AI coding as waste of time and foolish, which I agree with you 100%, but now we are shilling a course on AI agents. What should I make of it? Well, I don't fully understand the negativity here, to be very honest. I guess you're referring to that vibe coding video, and I 100% still stand to what I shared there. Vibe coding is not my thing and does not work for me. Creating applications with AI, which is what my course is about, is a totally different thing. You can 100% manually write all the code and still build an application that uses AI, right? That is something you can do. You can also try to use AI combined with manual coding, what we'll do here, to get the best of both worlds. So I don't really see a problem there, to be honest. So looks like, yeah, it identified stop propagation as the solution, which was also shared in the chat, which sounds good to me, but it still seems broken. So let's try if we can manually fix that, because that is the part. You can try to combine it and fix stuff manually if you're not happy. So let's see, where is the remove button? Remove. It is stopping propagation, so it should not trigger anything above that. And it's calling remove file, but still it's not working. So what's the main focus point? What are you going to teach us in the course? Well, I'm teaching you how you can build applications with AI. How you can, for example, build a research system where you use AI to automatically perform web search, summarize the results, stuff like that. The idea simply is to give you ideas and show you how you could use AI in your applications and what AI agents are, in the sense of tool or applications where AI can smartly choose tools, or also workflows where you clearly define all the steps, where some steps may use AI, some steps may not. So simply how you can leverage AI in a very smart way, or hopefully smart way, with it auto-selecting tools, or simply to enhance your existing workflows if it makes sense. But I'm not sure if you will really want that course, to be very honest, and that is absolutely fine. If you are not into AI, if you're just not interested in it, which it sounds a bit like, to be honest, that is totally fine and probably not the right choice. If you want to explore how you could maybe leverage large language models, then the course could be interesting. You also, of course, find more details on the landing page in the video there and so on. So back to this here. Why is this still bugging out even though we're stopping propagation? So where is it triggering that file? That file selector. So that's the drag and drop logic. Open file dialog. That's this button. And it is also doing that here with choose file. Choose a different file. The problem is everything here is a button, right? So that seems a bit off. That seems a bit problematic. Here. Oh, it's all the input? Is that the case? Yeah, that was the case. Okay. So basically, it created the file picker as an input that spanned everything. But now that looks better. So this works, but as I mentioned, it's not really uploaded. That is therefore what we need to do next, and that is what I'll use Cloudflare for, which, as I mentioned before, is essentially like AWS S3. It is a storage for files, any kinds of files. So I'll add a new bucket here named AI Captions. Default settings look good to me. And now the idea is to upload to this bucket, to this AI Captions bucket here. And again, I want to use AI for that. So that will actually involve a couple of steps. In this file, we're getting a video MP4 file by the user. That all works. The next step now is to upload that to Cloudflare R2 upon form submission. Therefore, please do the following. Add an action function that's triggered by a form that's wrapped around the form and contains the selected file via the file input. Also set the right enc type, because that is something it's sometimes forgot, that you need to set the enc type on the form. For now, do nothing but logging the file in the action. We'll add the upload logic later. So again, working step by step through the problem here. Yeah, coming back to that course, since you asked it again, yeah, it is about integrating AI into your into workflows mostly. You will gain logic that will help you integrate it into applications as well, I guess. But primarily, the goal of the course is to teach you how you can build workflows that solve specific problems that could potentially be automated or run in repetition with help of AI. Stuff like generate a blog post based on some input, or perform a web search, summarize the results based on some input, which you could also put into a separate application, which you expose to users, but which you could also run on your system. So now let's see, it added an action function here, and it did add a form. It set the enc type. That's looking good. The input is in there, and that input, by the way, hopefully contains, well, yeah, it contains the selected files, since that is where the files are added to. So therefore, if I keep by swiping to the left, therefore, if we give this another try, if I drag this, process video, nothing happens here, but I can see the log here. Though name empty, that does not look good. Get video as file. Is video the right name for this input? It is. Is it because I dragged and dropped? What if I choose that manually? Let me see. AI agents, out, videos. Then it works. Okay, so seems like the file is not added if it was dragged plus dropped. Please check. What do I think of long-term maintenance of AI-generated code? It's horrible if you don't check the code. So the idea is that you build it feature by feature, and you, of course, evaluate that code. You don't just blindly accept it and then go with it. So, of course, you want to carefully review it, especially before you put something into production. But for quickly building a prototype, using AI for code gen can be pretty useful. And like here, there is a bunch of code where you don't need to do in-depth validation to see that it generally looks right. But as you can also see, there are subtle problems in there. So you want to carefully evaluate eventually. It is, again, it is a balance. You can use it to quickly generate code. You can move faster. But if you only do that, you'll end up in deep problems. Like I did in that vibe coding video. The difference now is that now I'm trying to building it feature by feature. In that vibe coding video, I tried to build the entire application in large chunks of related features where it was not even able to get this to work. Here, we hopefully will get something to work. So let's see if that now works. Yeah, now I also get that output here after dragging and dropping. Because it now manually handles the submission, as it seems. Actually, I'm not sure. So that is, by the way, for example, a good example here. This code I'm not 100% happy with, because it's now handling the form submission manually instead of letting React Router do that entirely. And the better solution would be to ensure that if you drop a file, it really gets added to that file input. So actually, I'll reject this here and not accept it. And instead, I want to go here to handle drop and make sure that it does add that file to the file input, because that file input is in the form that will be submitted. So if the file is attached to the file input, it will be in the submitted content. Now we already have a ref added to this input, file input ref. So all we need to do here really is ensure that this file is now added to that file input through that file input ref. We can do that here and handle drop. Here, I want to use my file input ref and set the how do we do that? How do we do that? Append. The file, why is that not working? Is not assignable. Files. Gosh, how did this work? There was a way of interacting with that file input, just like you can, for example, trigger a click and add that file. Is it able to do that here? Add the file when dropped to the file input via the file input ref. Can you tell me the name of this theme? Cappuccino Mocha is the theme. Let's see if that approach works now. Yeah, it does. So, whoops, I much prefer, sorry for the zooming around, I much prefer this approach. Because now it's cleaner. Now we're always handling the form submission. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, sir. Okay, so now we got that. Now, as a next step, we want to upload this to Cloudflare R2. Now, that is something I've never done in Node.js, actually. I've never uploaded something to Cloudflare R2, so I have no idea how that works. Now, I would normally go to documentation, of course, to find out. But here, I'll see if AI knows that. So, next, in this component, we need to upload the submitted file to Cloudflare R2. The plan is to use pre-signed URLs for that. Pre-signed URLs, by the way, means that you generate a URL that leads to an object, or an object placeholder, you could say, on Cloudflare R2. And you can use that URL to upload to it then. And that pre-signed URL is only valid for a short period of time. And therefore, if it would be exposed or if others were to see it, by the time they see it, they likely can't use it anymore. And that's an elegant way of uploading through a public URL, which won't stay public for long, to that Cloudflare R2 bucket. Please let me know which dependencies I need to install for that. Now here I'll quickly switch to ask mode because I don't want it to write any code just yet. I just want it to tell me how to do that. I assume I need to install the AWS S3 SDK because Cloudflare R2, to my knowledge, is compatible with that S3 API. So I guess I'll be using that. I saw that in some tutorial in the past. Yeah, and it does tell me to install this. So looks like I need to install 2 packages, the S3, the client S3 and the S3 request pre-signer package. So I'll then switch back to agent mode here, and I'll quickly add these 2 packages here and spin up the dev server again. Great. Now please adjust the code in this file to use these packages to upload via pre-signed URLs to R2. The bucket name will be, what's my bucket name? The bucket name is AI Captions. And I will need to share some credentials, of course, but I'll do that in the .env file thereafter. So let's see what it does now. And I hope it does something that works because, as I mentioned, well, it is S3 compatible. I have worked plenty with S3, but it's also been some time, so we'll see. Let us see what it gives us here. By the way, this is of course getting a rather big file, but for now I'll keep it all in there for the sake of this stream. But I will say, of course, as I mentioned before, it will always process all the content here as context, which are a lot of extra tokens you're potentially paying for. And as was pointed out in the chat before, it's always a trade-off. You can also write code on your own. You should not forget this. Here, I'm deliberately doing more with AI. You want to find a mixture, a balance, because if you make every tiny fix with AI, if you knew how to do it on your own, then you'll not really be faster and you'll be paying for it. So you don't want to use it for everything, of course. If you know how to code. If you don't know how to code, you will end up with vibe coding, and that also unfortunately doesn't work that well in my experience. So here I need a couple of environment variables, which I will of course set off screen, but I will set them up here, and then I will populate them with values off screen because I don't want to share my R2 access keys and so on. So we'll need to set these 3 environment variables, and I'll do that off screen in a second. But first, let's see what it does here. It sets up a S3 client, hard codes the bucket name, of course. We could also put that into an environment variable, but let's keep it like this. Okay, then it's checking. It expects an action value in the request body here, get pre-signed URL. And then if that's the case, it gets the file name and file type. And then it tries to generate a unique key based on the date. And then it generates a pre-signed URL with getSignedURL, which is imported from the request pre-signer package. It passes the S3 client. We want to create a URL for putting an object there, for uploading an object. It expires in 1 hour. Actually, let's expire it in, let's say, 60 seconds, so in 1 minute. Whoops. Then it returns, well, that is a pretty complex way. You can't just return objects in action functions in React Router. So it's actually doing two things in it action now, as it seems. Or actually, it's only doing one thing. It's generating that URL and then it's returning it to then perform the actual uploading from the client side, which does make sense, I will say, because if you do it like this, you can show a nice progress bar on the client side. So that actually is not a bad solution. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to expect an extra action identifier in the submitted request, I guess, because since we're only doing one thing in that action function, why not always do it? So actually, I'll get rid of that if check here. And I don't expect to get this action. I don't think we need that here. And then we'll just try this. And here it's returning an error response if that fails. Error, we can leave that like this for now. And then on the client side, it's managing some uploading states, some progress, error, success. It's resetting the upload state with some function that's probably defined below. Yeah, that resets all states. It does that whenever we drop a new file. Okay, sure. Handle upload. So in there, okay, so again here, it's manually submitting this. And I guess this makes sense since we, well, I guess we can do it like this. The alternative would be to rely on React Router's form submission mechanism. The thing then just is that we need to take a look at what we're getting back then, and then use effect to trigger the actual upload process because we're first generating that pre-signed URL. So what it's doing here is it's actually manually sending a fetch request, a post request to /video, so to this route. And if you export an action function in React Router, that will essentially set up a post route handler for this route, a post request handler, so that action should be triggered. This object should be wrapped in a response, so we should be getting back a response here. That should work, I guess. And then after it got this response, it extracts the pre-signed URL and then sends another request to perform the actual upload. Now, actually, we should send this second request differently because you can't track upload progress with the fetch API. So I'll tell it. Looks good, I think, but the upload should be done with XHR, not fetch, since the former allows us to track progress. So please do that. And whilst it's working here, I'll go back to Cloudflare and off screen, unfortunately, since I'll need to get my credentials, I'll try to set up the different credentials I need to set up, the access key and so on. So that is what I'll do. So that will take a short second now. So we need the account ID. I got that. Then I need the, where is it? I need the access key and so on. Where is that again? Cloudflare R2. I need the, what's the name? Access key. Okay, manage API tokens. Sorry, I'll be done in a second, hopefully. Got it here. Okay, perfect. Got the access key. So that's something I'll store here. Secret access key. Okay, so that's now all stored. So in theory, that should work. In the meantime, it did edit this here. And now it is using XML HTTP request, which allows us to listen to on progress and update the upload progress on the go. So I will accept this and we'll just test it and see if that works. Or if I forgot something totally obvious. Now I will restart this to make sure that the updated environment variables, which Bun, by the way, loads automatically, are picked up. And then I'll drag this in here, upload to cloud storage, and we got an error. We got an error that's unfortunately not very helpful because I guess we returned in that action something which is not JSON. So for example, HTML, this is HTML. So could be a not found problem. Let's see if the action was triggered. Let's do that with good old console log debugging, because there's nothing better. So action gets logged, so that is triggered. The question is, what's causing this problem? Do we make it here? Do we get that pre-signed URL? Or that key that was generated here? Yeah, so we get that. So we return that, I guess. So we should actually make it past this first step and get our result here in the browser. So if we log here, well, then we just get that error. Upload error, but do we, yeah, syntax error. So error is presumably some HTML code, but where is it coming from? Sending a post request with form data. Is response okay? Response okay is true. So that seems to work. But result, parsing this as JSON, that fails? Is that the case? That fails. Okay. So what if we parse it as text? Oh, we get back a promise object. Well, no. I need to await this. That's the problem. Okay, so I got back an HTML document here. So my fetch call here, sending this post request, gives me an HTML document, which is weird. Now, I mentioned before that we don't need to manually construct a response here, but that is when we rely on using React Router for everything. When we manually send a request, we might need to do that. So let's actually wrap this into a response again. So it is generating everything correctly because I logged this here. Then we're returning a new response here in the action function with this body. And where we set the header. So that should work. We're not getting into this block, so we're not failing on the server side. And here in handle upload, we have result okay. So we don't have an error status code, which makes sense, I guess. Response okay, I mean. Why use AI to write code? It makes you dumber. Instead, use it to learn stuff and then do it by hand. I do actually kind of agree with this. If you let AI generate all your code, like here, this is a good example. You can end up in a situation where you find yourself in code you have not written yourself and you now need to understand, which, like here, as you can see, can be problematic. Now, I will say, if you do use AI for generating code, you know or you understand, and you could have written yourself too, which I here couldn't because I haven't pre-signed a URL in a long time. But if you know what code you want, you can speed yourself up. It is, as mentioned before, a balance you want to find. So here, what I'm not getting is why this request to /video to this URL, which does trigger this action, why this gives me an HTML response. That makes little sense to me. That makes little sense to me because clearly I'm returning a new response that is of type JSON, that contains JSON data. So that is weird, to put it like this. The name of the AI I'm using here is the Cursor tool and Claude for Sonnet. So I mean, again, we can use AI for debugging, or we can try using it. I'm getting an error. Because it wrote the code, why can't it fix it, right? Looks like I'm getting back some HTML code. But why? Go check the network tab. Well, true. The thing is, I did already see that it's returning this HTML code again, this page essentially. So it is essentially triggering this component function again and giving me that, which is a bit weird since I'm sending a post request. For a GET request, it should render and return this component, this route component. For a post request, it should actually not do that. Okay, great. So it's wrapping it now in an extra variable. I'm not sure if that will help. Yeah, and this is all bullshit. Is it possible that if you return something in an action, that has been a long time ago. If I return something in an action using React Router, that it automatically executes the component function thereafter and somehow returns that as a response? That could be the case. That could be the case because, of course, this is not a regular route. I mean, what we can do and what should work, I hope, is we can take that action, put that into an API route, which is still a regular route, but a route which only, or a route file which only contains the action. So now here we can import route. Hello, I want to get the route for the pre-sign. No function declaration. So now I want to take this with me and this all. Because you can definitely create API routes, which you can just call. Okay, let's just any this for now. Normally, a React router should generate the type for this on the fly. Not sure. Oh, because I haven't added it to routes. So now it should actually generate those types here on the fly. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So action arcs. Okay. So now I have a separate route. Not convinced if that does the trick though, to be very honest, but we'll see. And now it's this route I want to send my request to get that pre-signed URL. Yeah, right. Maybe the action is doing some magic here when in the same file as a component function. We'll see, I guess. So let's reload and try again. Let's drag and drop a file, click upload. Good, good. So that looks better. Now we got a different error. Now we got a course error from the request to Cloudflare. So pre-signing and generating that pre-signed URL, that did work. So now I assume this is some configuration I need to do on Cloudflare's side. So I need to add a course policy. Now I'll do that off screen quickly, because now I need to configure Cloudflare R2 to allow my app, which is of course running on a different server, to send a request to it. And I do this off screen because I'm not sure which information might be disclosed. Here, course policy add. I want to allow, what's my URL, or my port is 5173. And I want to allow these methods here. Okay, that's not enough as it seems. So just so you know, I'm reading, good old reading of a documentation, reading this article by Cloudflare that I need to add a course policy. And I did that. I did add, well, I guess I can safely share this so that it's not as boring for you. here I'm on this screen and I'm editing this course policy. Okay, now this is totally on the right and hard to see. And I'm trying to set it up such that I can send a request. And actually that should look good. Let's see again. If I do this. Origin localhost 5173 has been blocked, but I have allowed this. Localhost 5173. I did add this to my policy here. No access control allow origin header is present on the requested resource. Well, I have said it. Why will you not use that? Does it take some time for this to propagate? Only a cross-origin request will include course response headers. Is presence of the origin HTTP request header. Let's see, do we have that header? Network. Request header. Yeah, we got the origin. So that is set up. The value in allowed origins must be a valid header value. Yeah, it is. It is. I have added localhost 5173. So that should work, I guess. It's the pre-flight. But does this actually count? Google the options request. Cloudflare R2. Course pre-flight. Problem with settings course policy. Oh, we're back. Oh no, it's not Stack Overflow. For a second I was excited. So we got a bunch of problems here, but unfortunately not too many solutions. I have allowed put requests, just to be clear. Okay, maybe this one. Connect DR to the custom domain. Well, I have no custom domain hosted on Cloudflare. I'm not sure. So what I will try quickly, do it like this, save. Let's try again. Whoop. Hell, yeah, thank you very much. Nope. It's a put request and I have allowed put. Forbidden. But because of course, right? Yeah. Because of that. I can't add options. I just tried it. And you shouldn't need to, but I tried it anyways. And if I try to add options, unfortunately, well, I can show it here, I guess. If I Let me reload. Let me shrink this and bring it over here so that it's not obscured by the chat. So here you can see my course policy. I have allowed everything for now, temporarily. And I have added get, put, and post. And if I try to add options, I get this error, this policy is not valid. Right? So that's the problem here. And I should only need put, by the way. But yeah, anyways. I also don't think I need to add any special other header because I only got standard headers here. So yeah, course can be so annoying, especially here where I have to deal with the configuration options Cloudflare gives me. And I mean, they have a basic example here, which is super simple. But yeah, I'm not looking to make a GET request, of course. I mean, we can try adding allowed headers. I'm not convinced that this will make any difference, but let's allow all headers. Save this. And let's try this again, but I fear... Oh, well, that was it. Okay, that was it. Good. So now we're uploading, as it seems. Now we're uploading. Got some nice feedback here. Let's see if it really worked. And for that, of course, I'll go back to my bucket here. Reload. And yeah, there's a videos folder, and in there I got an MP4 file. That worked. Great. Now we can go on to the next step and use 11 Labs to create a transcription. So for that, we can use the speech-to-text API. The speech-to-text API can be used to convert speech to text, so to create a transcription. It's this Scribe v1 model that we'll be using. And they do have some API docs somewhere. API reference, endpoints, we need speech to text, create transcript, that's the endpoint we want. For that, of course, you need an 11 Labs account. You need to be paying, I believe. I have a paid account, so therefore I can get such an API key, which we'll need to add to the request. Then we can send a request to this endpoint. And what's pretty cool about 11 Labs, about this API endpoint, is that we can actually specify a cloud storage URL. And that allows us to actually specify a URL to a Cloudflare R2 or AWS S3 and so on object. And 11 Labs will get it from there. So we don't need to manually download it and re-upload it to 11 Labs. Instead, we can just upload it to Cloudflare R2 and then use that. Yeah, you can make that progress with Axios too. So that's the kind of request we want to send. So I'll again try to get the AI to write this for me and copy this URL to give it that page as extra context. Before I do that though, whoops, I would have almost opened the .env file here. I don't want to do that because in there I'll add my 11 Labs API key. And off screen, I'll quickly go to 11 Labs and get my API key. But of course, I don't want to show that to you here. So let's create a new one. Speech to text access. Speech to text, yes. Create, copy, paste it in there. Okay, got it set up. Now I'll start a new chat. This app is working as intended. Uploading works. Now, as a next step, a request must be sent to 11 labs to create a transcript. Please do that once the upload finished. By the way, we could definitely also try to put that all onto the server side by putting it all into an action function. Performing the upload on the client side, though, has the advantage that we can track this progress. I mentioned this before, but that's the reason why I'm doing it here. Now, in theory, we might now want to trigger some server-side code again, though. So we might want to add a new API route, transcribe, and export an async action function here, and go to routes and register that here. So this transcribe route, so that we can again perform that on the server side and not on the client side. That would then, for example, well, I guess it doesn't matter here. Oh, well, it does matter because I'll need my 11 labs API key. And I don't want to have that on the client side. So it does matter. I want to do that transcription on the server side. So, finished. For that, please put the transcription logic into this transcribe file, the action function here, and trigger that once the upload finished from inside add video. Make sure to pass the pre-signed URL. Actually, we'll need a new pre-signed URL, URL which allows getting the file, I guess. Because the one we currently got, I think, only allows putting the file, because we created with put command here. Where is it? Here. That should be a pre-signed URL which only allows uploading. Now we need one that allows downloading, because 11 labs, of course, will download that file. Yeah, good that you will turn off your screen when I expose my credentials. That's too kind. So make sure to pass a pre-signed URL that allows getting the file to the transcribe action. Okay, we got a couple of things to do here. So first things first. Let's start by triggering the action in @transcribe and pass the pre-signed URL that allows downloading the uploaded file to it. Therefore, added pre-sign to also support creating a pre-signed URL for downloading for the file we just uploaded. Okay, that's a bunch of instructions. Let's see if that works. That is easily something where AI might get stuck, but we'll see if it works. So the idea is that now that we uploaded the file, we get a new pre-signed URL for that uploaded file, and we then pass that to the transcribe action so that there in the future we can trigger the transcription process with help of 11 labs. That is the idea. So let's see what it's doing. In pre-sign, it is now correctly setting up the action function such that we can generate different pre-signed URLs, either for downloading or for the else case, for uploading, which is the existing logic. So for downloading, it is basically creating a pre-signed URL like before, but with the get object command option. So for getting an object, for downloading it. And I'll make that valid for, let's say, 2 minutes. That's what it's doing here. So that looks good. In transcribe, it did not do anything yet. And in video, there it also has not done anything yet. Here, after finishing the upload process, it will need to get a new pre-signed URL. And by the way, this code is getting a bit out of hand here. We're doing a lot of things all on the client side. I would definitely want to clean up and split that code at some point. This is getting too much. That's all being handled here in one function. So yeah, that is something we'll have to look into, I guess, at some point. So here it's calling start transcription with the result key once the upload finished. And in start transcription, it is sending that request to the pre-sign URL, setting the action to download to get a pre-signed URL for downloading. And then here it's submitting that data, which includes the... Oh, then it's triggering the transcribe function here. It's doing that here. And in transcribe, it's doing a bunch of stuff, actually. It's extracting the pre-signed URL and the file name. Then it logs something, handles some errors. And it tries to interact with 11 labs already, even though I did not ask it for it. But then it tries to send a request to 11 labs. Well, it tries to download the file. Yeah, I don't want that. I don't want any of that. There is a reason why I did not ask for it. So let's actually return nothing for now here because I don't want to do anything yet. Other than that, it looked good, I'd say. So let's see whether that works. For that, so let's see, to judge whether it works, I guess we'll see here if we log the file name and download URL in the transcribe file. If we see that log, uploading, getting the pre-signed URL for downloading, that all worked. So I'll upload the same file again. We'll have to, I'll pick a smaller file next time so that this is even faster. But I'll upload it again, and then we'll see how things work out thereafter. If things do work thereafter. So let's see here in the server-side logs. Yeah, no error. I got starting transcription, got a pre-signed URL. So yeah, that should work, I guess. So now, new chat. And again, I would clean up the code, but I want to make some progress here first. So now I want to use that documentation here and see if that works. And I want to use that cloud storage URL setting. So transcribe the MP4 file stored on Cloudflare R2 via the pre-signed URL you get in the action function. And here I want to pick the one from the transcribe TS file. For that, use the, what's the name? Cloud storage URL. Cloud storage URL option 11 Labs offers on its transcribe endpoint. Check their docs to understand how to trigger the transcription process. And I hope that it carefully reads that document so that it will set this up correctly. Again, another instance of you could also try it on your own. If it gets it right, you could, of course, save some time. But depending on how often it gets it wrong, you might overall not save a lot of time. So getting that 11 Labs API key, which I did set up off screen, so that here will exist. And then it is sending a request, set the model ID to scribe v1, which looks good because that is scribe v1 indeed, so that is correct. And model ID is correct, written like this. Cloud storage URL is also correct, written like this. Yeah, it is. And that is the pre-signed URL, which allows 11 apps to download that. Then it sends this request, and it sends the transcription form data with that. Which should, yeah, it wants form data. So that should work. That should work. The API key is also set, yeah, and it did set it correctly. So it looks like it did understand, and it doesn't understand anything. It's just predicting tokens. But the context we passed to it seems to be a context that was helpful, and it generated the right code as it seems. So it should transcribe this content, and then we get the transcription result. Now, of course, I want to do something with that transcription result, and I want to store the captions we're getting back. Now, in reality, I would probably store them on Cloudflare R2 again. To quickly see whether it worked, I'll temporarily store it on my local file system using the file system API by Node.js. And I'll accept this, by the way. That looks good to me. So I will go down here and I will write the transcription result. Actually, the transcription result will be an object in this shape, right? It will have word level timestamps, and we can also request SRT timestamps. For that, we need to set the additional formats option. So I want to do that. So I will actually append additional formats, SRT, though additional formats is technically an object or a list of objects. And I guess we need to stringify this, where we set a format key to SRT, language to EN. No, that is actually not supported here. I think the rest should be fine. I think that's the correct way of requesting SRT captions. I hope it is. Again, I've never used this API in Node.js, just in Python, but I think that was the way to do it. So then I want to save that information I get back. And yeah, for the moment, we can write it all to one JSON file, and then later we can save it in different files. So let's see whether that works. Going back, I'll upload a shorter file to speed this up, a smaller file, I should say. And we got an error from transcribe. Bad request. Transcription service error. 11 labs API returned 400. Invalid parameters. Requesting additional formats. Must have diarization and timestamps enabled. Yeah, I remember this. There is this. Where is it? This diarize option, which is by default set to false, but which must be set to true. That's the only one, I think. So we need to go back to our configuration and also set diarize to true. Now with that done, let's see. Processing transcription, that's looking better. Got a success message. And let's see, I got a transcription JSON file with the results. And that is now the transcription result we got back from ElevenLabs for that video file we uploaded. And they give us word level captions. And they also give us the additional formats we requested, SRT captions. And that indeed are the captions of the video I just uploaded. So now we could, of course, extract those additional formats, SRT captions, and store them in a separate file. And also upload those to Cloudflare R2, because that might be the main data storage we want to use. And we also might want to delete the MP4 files we got stored there once we're done processing them. And actually, I mentioned before that I would want to convert those MP4 files to MP3 files before sending them to ElevenLabs, because ElevenLabs is also able to transcribe MP3 files, of course, because that would mean that we send less data to ElevenLabs. And that matters because they have a limit of, I think, 2 gigabytes per file. And the files I uploaded thus far are super small, but actually processing and converting them to MP3 first makes sense. But unfortunately, for today, I'm out of time. I gotta go. But I'll do all these things in next week's live stream. So no new project next week. Instead, next week I will continue this project, and I will make sure that we convert MP4 files to MP3. We'll also clean up the code a bit because it is getting messy, as I mentioned, as it sometimes is the case. If you let AI do too much, you want to step in and control it manually. And we'll also do the other things. We'll store the SRT captions on Cloudflare again. We'll store we'll create VTT captions and store those. And of course, we want to work on those burned in captions. So plenty of stuff to do. Sorry, I was not able to do everything today, but we made some progress. Hopefully some interesting parts. Hopefully also some examples for how you can use AI and what the pitfalls are. It's the same as always. You can end up in places where too much code is generated by AI and you get lost in it, as you saw here where I got lost with some errors where it took me quite some time to debug them. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I guess, but hopefully still it was interesting. And hi everyone who joined the last minutes. Hi at Der Strategie Nerd. I do watch your videos, they're amazing. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, thanks everyone who joined. This video will be available tomorrow on my YouTube channel, Maximilian Extended. And again, next week I'll continue here and I'll try to improve the code and add more features. Hopefully it was interesting. See you in the future. Bye-bye.